Okay, so as I just said, this is really kind of your webinar that I've tried to make a bit more personalised in terms of sports and when we're very active and what it might mean to you. And I just wanted to dig a little bit into why we might start suffering signs and symptoms, and more importantly, what can we do about those should they show up for us. And so just digging into then, I like to call the menopause really a transitional life phase. And that's because right back, and this isn't true for all women, but I would certainly say about 80% of women probably fall into this bracket here, in that really kind of from early 40s, we can start to feel a bit more erratic in our rise and fall of hormones. And that can then start symptoms or start things like anxiety, perhaps, in our early to mid 40s, and sometimes it catches people a little bit off guard because we're not really expecting much at that stage, because the menopause itself is talked about quite a lot, but it's that period before when actually sometimes women can suffer even more than the actual menopause to postmenopausal as well. So I think that it's that catches us ladies off guard sometimes. So the perimenopausal phase really can start anytime, almost like 10 years before actual menopause. And the average age for menopause is about age 50-51 in the UK for ladies. And that's really the technical term for when we've not had any menstruation for 12 months. And so it's that build up to almost this period then, and that cessation of menstruation, of those monthly periods, that really can be quite tough for us and cause many issues as we'll come into, and really catches, if you like, left field. Once we've started to move through that menopausal midpoint, really, we're into this post-menopause, which that 12-month period, it's really opening out then that 10 years, if you like, after that cessation of our periods. And so it's in this post-menopausal phase that a lot of women start to feel a bit more empowered and actually start to feel better again, because as we'll see, I've done a little graph for us. It's almost, yes, the hormones start to flatline a little bit, but we've not got those erratic rise and falls, which can really throw us off. And so we start to be a bit more empowered, but we do then become sometimes a little bit more at risk of things like osteoporosis and heart disease. And we'll look at the reasons why that might be. So we're really looking at kind of, if you like, that 20-year window when we're moving through this transitional phase. Some ladies might be much shorter than that. And of course, we know that some ladies do go into an early menopause as well in their 30s. And obviously that's diagnosed by the GP. And that's probably a small percentage of the population, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And I know a few friends personally that have gone through that, and it's quite difficult to get a diagnosis, I do believe, so early on, but that can happen. So again, every lady is different, of course, but this is generally speaking. And so let's just have a look at some of the stats then, because menopause is a really hot topic at the moment, and that's been really brought to the fore by, if you like, celebrities like Davina McCall, and almost like there's a lot of Facebook groups and women empowerment movements, which are wonderful, where obviously we're raising awareness, and lots of podcasts now as well about menopause. So if we just think back actually to the early 1900s, really ladies was only expected to live until around the age of 50, and there wasn't really going through menopause until almost that age. And so it was almost like menopause then, you know, tended to fall off a cliff, because it might have been at that point severe disease, severe bacteria, which we know that as the hygiene and everything came in, and people started to clean things up and realise the importance of washing hands, say for instance after surgery or after childbirth, which was not even known then, and started to clear up a lot of these things. And so today now we're living a lot longer, which is wonderful, but living a lot longer, we want to live more empowered, but also healthier as well, and actually enjoy that old age that we are gifted with. And so we've got a lot of women currently, as you can see there, in this transitional phase, in this menopausal phase here. And we've got 1 in 3 saying that they've got constant symptoms, and obviously that's not a good thing. That's not what we want our ladies to be. We want our ladies to feel well right throughout their life. And so just a couple of stats on there for you. You can see that we've got about a third that already take vitamins and supplements to help their own health, but almost 70% was not at all prepared for the menopause and perimenopause. And I think that that's because of what I said earlier, and that it does catch us left field because we're not expecting it until almost kind of getting 48, 49, 50, 51, and it can catch us much sooner with these symptoms. And the information sources are quite interesting, I think, because there's only 21% that are currently looking towards the GP for that information. And then most of us are like just talking in groups, in family and friends, many of us on social media, which I think is a huge driver and a huge tool if used correctly, where we can find good information in the right groups. But I think one of the things that's really underlooked is we talk a lot about physical signs and symptoms of this menopausal transition, but we don't often talk about feelings. And I think that this is super important. And as a lady myself in that perimenopausal, menopausal transition, it can really affect many aspects of our life, but not just our life. It can also affect relationships with a partner or a hubby, or a wife, or it can with your siblings, it could be with your children, it could be with your work colleagues, and that's because of these feelings as well that sometimes, if you like, exacerbate or come to the fore when we're not expecting them because of these erratic hormonal changes. And so it can really start to affect ladies' confidence. So sometimes ladies can start to go inwards, which obviously we don't want, feel more unattractive. The anxiety is then driven up, and we can see there on that chart on the bottom, ladies feeling more tired. And if we're feeling more tired and not quite sleeping properly, anxiety can rise as well. And I think if we're more anxious, we're starting to feel less confident than we did. Some ladies, because of a physical symptom, such as maybe a little bit of weight gain or bloating, start to also feel unattractive. We might notice signs in our skin as well. And then because we start to go through this phase, we can start to feel more invisible, if you like, because it's almost like, we've come out of those childbearing years, and obviously our, if you like, outward appearance, we might start questioning that, and if it wasn't what it was 20 years ago, of course, and we start to retreat sometimes into ourselves, which is a real shame. And so I just really wanted to bring that to the front, because I think it does affect many relationships that we have around us, and it can affect us in the home. And then because sometimes we might react like we don't want to react as well, it can have a resounding effect as well on the full household. But just up there, I think there's huge stats. So we're talking to a huge group of women in terms of globally. We've got 1 billion women on that menopausal journey, and about 15.5 million here in the UK at any one time, not really wanting to take HRT and looking for an alternative. Or some ladies, of course, want to take HRT, but then perhaps support that as well with something a little bit more natural. And so when ladies was questioned, this research that I'm talking about now came from quite a relatively new movement. It's only been going 5 years, and it's called Gen M. And this is two ladies that started it, that was actually going through the menopause, that felt invisible, that wanted to really raise awareness for women. And so they've now gone on and done this huge collective, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And they've done a lot of research as part of that. So this is their research. And talking to ladies, they found the most common was all to do around temperature regulation. And so when we start to feel a little bit hot and bothered, and when we feel hot and bothered, we get irritated. So then that comes out in a different way. And of course, we might have day sweats or night sweats as well. And if we're having night sweats, we're not sleeping. We might be having to strip the bed in the middle of the night, having windows open, even change pajamas, clothes, or whatever it might be. And if we're not sleeping right and we feel hot, bothered and irritated, our mood swings as well can sometimes be quite erratic, and that can of course carry on through the daytime. Not just because we're not sleeping right, but also as well because of the effects of the hormones. Then we might not be able to think quite as clearly as we could do before, maybe a bit more slow to recall. It might be word recall, so maybe what some ladies call brain fog, and short-term memory loss. And now I used to do this before perimenopause, is like put my keys down somewhere or an umbrella, and then the amount of umbrellas I must have bought in my life is incredible. But putting things down, can't remember what we've done with them, this type of thing can exacerbate during that perimenopausal and menopausal transition as well. Literally not being able to sleep. I don't know if any ladies, it'll be really interesting actually at the end to have a discussion, suffer with this, but almost bouts of insomnia, because certainly as you are entering perimenopause, and more so, we can almost, some ladies can get to sleep, but then wake up at 2:30, 3:30, 4 a.m, but like a bolt of lightning, and then the anxiety can start and can't sleep again. And that would obviously depend on what's going on in somebody's life as well in terms of stress load, but certainly that can start to happen. I think once that happens, it's almost a bit of a domino effect for everything else. As I spoke about earlier, a little bit of weight gain, or the lady's shape as well can change. So it might not be that we put on weight. So like if we're pear-shaped, I'm a little bit pear-shaped. So my bum and my thighs might get a little bit bigger, but also actually as well, my shape might change in, maybe I've never held weight around my stomach, but now I'm starting to hold a little bit of weight around there as well. And so ladies often in this phase start to see that their shape changes, which then leads into the lack of confidence, because then we don't feel good in clothes. And so again, I always just think it's that sliding scale, how one thing can just exacerbate other things. Quite relative to our active group here in terms of joint pain and muscle aches, because clearly for orienteering, there's a lot of sprinting involved, a lot of thinking involved. So we're thinking about brain fog, but we're thinking about muscle function, endurance as well. The joint pain can start, and also muscle aches, and perhaps a little bit fatigue and said a little bit earlier as well. And so we'll have a look at that, why that might be. And then as we've talked about anxiety, maybe more headaches. We know that then the periods and menstruation gets a bit more regular, and maybe catched unaware, we might have heavier periods, which again can affect confidence as well, and even sort of going out of the house if they're really bad, and certainly traveling on aeroplanes and things like that. So I've just capped off at the top there all of the ones that I would see almost grouped together, because if we're not sleeping because of night sweats or because of anxiety, it just has this huge effect right across our life. And so there's a couple of little botanicals we can talk about a little bit later on that do help with those types of signs if anybody's suffering them. So let's now just have a look then at why this might be happening and how this whole roller coaster might start off. And so I just really wanted to start right at the beginning in saying that we always talk about estrogen, don't we? But estrogen actually comes in a few different forms. And so this would also lead into why, when we're actually going through the menopausal transition, is why we might also feel effects, as well as lower levels in general. We actually start to produce less of our strongest form, and then we go into a weaker form. And so this can almost have like that double impact on our ladies. And so if we just look at those, then we've got, and this is just, if you like, the basic ones that I just wanted to bring to your attention tonight. We've got estrogen, they're all estrogens, but say we've got type 1, we've got 2, and we've got 3. And if we just look at type 2 for now, we'll see that the type 2 is the strongest type of estrogen that we produce, and that's the strongest from the ovaries. And that would make sense, wouldn't it, in our childbearing years, that we are really pushing out this strong estrogen, obviously as one of our key sex hormones. But estrogen's got many effects throughout the body, not just in terms of a sex hormone, but it has effects right throughout our musculoskeletal system, so on our bones and our muscles and our joints. It also plays into our immune system, so sometimes why we can become susceptible to more infections. Cardiovascular and nervous system, so thinking about anxiety and mood and irritation there as well. And so right across, if you like, our full system, mucous membranes, so we'll talk about dryness a little bit later on. If we think about cognitive function, this memory recall, pelvic muscles, and so we think about those strong pelvic muscles, obviously to be able to hold the baby, and how obviously sometimes then we are wanting to exercise and keep those strong post-childbirth. And certainly as we move into kind of that menopausal transition. And then we've got this beautiful skin and this nice strong hair when we're in this childbearing phase, years if you like, and we can start to see all of these physical effects as we get that down regulation in estrogen. And so really what happens is, as the ovaries start to atrophy, and so they start to obviously shrink, and then, we get less quality eggs there, we've got the irregular menstruation, and then ultimately we stop, if you like, releasing those eggs. We then really move over to E1, estrogen type 1. And so that's no longer coming from the ovaries. So it's a much weaker estrogen. So we've got a weaker estrogen now happening, and we've got less of it happening. And it's a bit more challenging as well to produce it as well. And so peripheral tissue really means that we can start to make it in our fat cells. We can start to make it in other body tissues. But really the main organ, if you like, that would take over are our adrenal glands. And our adrenal glands are what just sit on the back of our kidneys, and the two almost triangle shaped glands. And these are responsible for producing other things like stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline. And so now we've got that takeover where we've got the adrenal glands now trying to pump out more of those base hormones to be able to make estrogen within the body, and also in our fat cells and skin and everywhere else. So we've got that kind of double effect, if you like. And then E3, we usually hardly produce any except during pregnancy. And so really we are having the strongest type. Once we enter this perimenopause, menopausal phase, that starts to downregulate, hence we start to feel the symptoms, and then we start to put a bit more demand on our adrenal glands, on that stress system, to be able to make a few more of those base hormones to be able to make estrogen. And depending on our body weights as well, that can also affect how well we can make estrogen. So we produce estrogen inside of us, but we also take estrogen in, this which is not necessarily a good thing, because this can be driven by a lot of plastics. They can mimic estrogen as well, but more of a toxic estrogen, which we wouldn't necessarily want in our bodies. There's toxic chemicals in the air. We're putting chemicals on our skin from maybe body lotions, deodorants, makeup. So things even like clothes dyes. All of these type of external toxins can have an estrogenic effect, but not necessarily a nice estrogenic effect as well. And of course, if we've taken oral contraceptives during our kind of like, childbearing years to avoid a pregnancy, or obviously you might have taken it because of severe period pain, or any other reason, obviously, while I've gone to see the GP, then that can also have a load of estrogen coming into the body. And of course, then some ladies may well choose HRT, which again is bringing more estrogen into the body as well. And so I've already touched on a lot of this, but I think it's just useful to really see it in a graph of why we might start to feel a little bit more erratic. And if I just point here, if we can just see really around this kind of childbearing phase, that we've got this cyclical nice rise and fall here of progesterone on the thick pink line. And so that would be in our childbearing years, where we're having those periods each month, and so we would obviously expect these big rises and falls. And the same as well with estrogen. Estradiol is just another name. And then again, we've got these peaks and falls of estrogen as well during this phase, and that's as one is high, the other is slightly lower, and then they kind of balance each other out in the middle. And then what happens then, as we start to move into this perimenopausal phase, as you can see here, we do get those dips now. So we're getting lower levels of progesterone being produced. Progesterone makes us generally feel good, which is why ladies then can start with anxiety and anxious feelings kind of around those early 40s and mid 40s as well. And we'll see that the balance starts to slightly go out with estrogen as well, where we're getting dramatic more peaks and big dips, and dramatic peaks and big dips again, until we kind of go under that flatline area. And the same with progesterone. So again, when we're starting to feel a bit low, and some ladies can feel very, very low and almost like a little bit depressed, anxiety can then be driven high, because really progesterone does make us feel good as well. So now we can start to see why we might start to feel worse actually in this perimenopausal phase, and it catches us a little bit left field. So I'm hoping that makes sense now. You can probably see that as well. And then what happens here then, kind of as our eggs kind of would die off and not be released, and then we're starting to ask the body now to make that weaker estrogen for us, we can see that we are starting to flatline a little bit more in terms of progesterone here. And again, we almost have like this last kick out here of estrogen, but you can see that then that's quite unbalanced because we've got these sort of like peaks of estrogen with this very low progesterone. And so it's always really looking at the ratios and the balance and the peaks and falls of the two sex hormones and how they would balance each other off. And so we've kind of got to this phase here, if you like, and then you can also see that this starts to flatline after we've kind of had this year, if you like, of no menstruation. And so we're really getting kind of this flat line, but that's why some women can actually feel better, because like I said earlier, we've got this flat lining rather than this erratic rise and fall each month. And so that starts to almost, you know, take us out of that phase. And a lot of ladies that we speak to will often say, thank God I'm out of all of that. And that'll be the reason why, is they just feel much more steady, even though obviously maybe, you know, we don't feel maybe as glowing, if you like, in these types of outward things there. And so what happens then when we've got this drop in estradiol and drop in progesterone, it does put us at increased risks for certain conditions, because as we saw in a couple of slides back, this estrogen has effect right systemically right throughout the body. So it has effect on our cardiovascular system, on the strength of our bones as well. We know about skin and muscles as well. It can be harder for us to keep our muscle mass on during this period as well. And if we're having problems in keeping our muscle mass on, we know that they can make the joints more unstable. We can be more prone to injury, but also muscle mass helps us balance our blood sugar. So if our blood sugar is not balanced, that's when we can start to look at pre-diabetes, diabetes, and we can also be thinking about cravings, extreme cravings and things like this, to try and keep lifting the blood sugar up, maybe a glass of wine, maybe coffees, because we just need to keep getting a bit of a lift again as well. And so we kind of see them systemic increases there. And again, with progesterone can also affect bone health as well, memory and cognitive, sleep quality. That's where we'll see almost that feel good. And then dryness can start to kick in for us, and those sweats, day hot flashes, and it can also be night sweats as well. So I'm hoping now that all starts to really link in for us, and why we can obviously start to be at a more higher risk, if you like, for some of these things. And so just to link all this back then in terms of these signs and symptoms that a lady might feel moving through this transition, we've got the physical aspect, and we've also got the emotional aspect as well in terms of feelings. So all of the things we've talked about, the flushes, the weight gain, perhaps bloating, maybe we're not digesting our food as well, that can cause all kinds of things, maybe a bit of reflux. We're starting to say I've got IBS type symptoms, maybe even like manifesting into constipation. Our joints are starting to ache as well, and we'll dig into this. And if anybody's got any questions around joints, then I'd welcome them to the table, particularly speaking to this group. Anxiety, we saw that progesterone's really low. We can get more irritable because we've not got as much of our feel-good hormone as well. And then, of course, if we're not sleeping, we're going to be more irritable. If we're hot, we're going to get more irritated as well. This is often when ladies consider the libido will drop as well, and they're not that bothered anymore about engaging perhaps with their partner. But there's a lot of things we can do in terms of that. But then obviously, of course, and that can sometimes affect relationships as well, which can then drive anxiety and a bit of anger and tension. Sometimes feel really overwhelmed by things that normally maybe 5 years ago would have handled really, really well and quickly. And sometimes we've got a much lower tolerance for people and how they might be towards us. I also just think that generally comes with age, but of course with this fluctuation in hormones as well, that can be exacerbated. So we can react maybe to things that we wouldn't have reacted to before. And of course we can have that low mood as well, and thinking about our muscles and energy. So that real systemic effect that we might not attribute to going through this period, and we might think it's something else. And of course the body's intricately interlinked, as we know, in this well-researched group, but a lot of this can be driven by that hormonal balance. But what's kind of happening underneath that, and how do we solve it, really? And so in sports then, when we're looking at joints, I've just put a couple of slides in here for you just to really explain what's happening, is that here again, we can see with age, we've got our collagen levels. So when we're in our early 20s, like late teens, early 20s, we're abundant in collagen. And collagen's, we always think of skin, but of course, as sports, we know that it's needed for bone structure. We know that it's needed for muscles. It's needed for our ligaments, our tendons. So our full structure, without collagen, would almost just be like a little bit of jelly. And so that gives us our tensile strength. It's really our building blocks for our body as well. And so all of that strength and everything that keeps us upright and strong is really driven by collagen. And so we can see we're going to get a natural decline then of our ability to be able to produce our own collagen and replenish the collagen within our body. Kind of starts to drop off at 30, 40, and you can see by age 50, so when we're really in that menopause, we are literally half of what collagen production we had before, and collagen content as well. And so that's when obviously the muscles as well, our bones can start to shrink and things like this. So really thinking about that collagen aspect as well. And of course we can see that in our outer skin sometimes, and that would be, I'm hoping that visual on the right hand side there just gives you an idea where we've got like this strong, if you like, matrix to be able to hold everything in the right place. And ultimately that's what it is. So thinking back to, I mentioned pelvic floor muscles, we've got this strong collagen holding everything where it should be. As this collagen starts to deplete, and maybe to add on top of that, we're not taking much collagen in through our diet, particularly if we're vegan or vegetarian, then obviously as that starts to break off, we're starting to lose that tensile strength, not only in the skin, but obviously across our full structure, and our bones might not be as compacted because obviously we're starting to lose collagen from that as well. And so really think about collagen as our structural foundation. And then also coupled with that, if we just look at our peak bone mass, and we achieve that peak bone mass kind of around our 20s, really hold that almost sort of like 20s into 30s, which is great because we've got that strong estrogen if we go back to that slide there. And so we're really kind of holding that strength, but we can see sort of like at 40, 50 and certainly 60, that postmenopausal phase, when we've lost that strong estrogen, that natural, if you like, capacity to produce as much estrogen, then that's when obviously we can start to also see this big bone loss. So we've got our cells that build bone, and we've got cells that would take, if you like, almost eat bone, but that's fine because we need to keep the bone matrix healthy, which is why we have bone building, and we've also got cells that eat the cells that are no longer needed or that are maybe not replicating as well and keeping us strong as well. And so, but we just get then imbalanced. We don't have as many cells working to be building our bone, and we've got more of these eating bone cells, as well as this estrogen drop, as well as this collagen drop. So that's why us ladies can then be more susceptible to things like osteopenia and osteoporosis at this life phase. So let's just have a look then at some diets, nutrients and lifestyles that we can maybe look at and why they would make a difference. And hopefully we'll start to cement some connections here. So I just wanted to just very briefly say this is the liver, and this will hopefully make sense in a minute, is that to, if you like, have the healthy estrogen in our body at any life phase, but particularly more so as we start to kind of go into that menopausal transition, we want estrogen to really exert its effects in our body, so help build our bones, help us be sharp, help us with our libido, help us with all of these things that we want to work well in our body. Think clearly, think quickly, have, good skin, dense muscles. All of these things want estrogen to exert its effect. But once it's done that, we do want it out of the body, because otherwise it can get recycled. And if it gets recycled, it can then turn into an estrogen that perhaps we don't want in our body. And that would be driving into sort of when we're thinking about fibroids, we might be thinking about lumps and this type of thing, that of course, absolutely not to say that anything would go on to be cancer at all, but if we have a lot of the wrong estrogen or the estrogen we don't want in our body, then that could maybe be feeding into that. And if we've got some female cancers perhaps in our family as well, it just starts to paint a little picture for us. So what's super important, so this will link to the foods, is that when estrogen's exerted all of its wonderful effects, that we actually want to make sure we can get it out of the body. And this is where liver health is really, really key here, because the hormones or toxin, if you like, the hormones would come in here, and don't worry about this phase 1 and phase 2, but basically there's a part here. I always think of the liver as like a little sorting factory, and basically the hormones would go through the first part of the sorting factory, and then once they've been processed through that phase, they go into the next phase, which is almost like the packing part. And once they are packed and ready to go, they're joined together with something else to help bring them out of our body, and then ultimately we will pee out or poo out our hormones that have done the job and the excess hormones. And this happens with toxins as well that might enter the body. So alcohol, if we're smoking, breathing in chemicals, putting chemicals on our skin, drinking things out of plastics, or eating ready meals that have heated up and heated plastics. And this isn't to frighten anybody, because we've all got a toxic load. It's just how our body deals with everything that comes into the body that needs to be rid of. It comes in, if you like, to this sorting area, it goes into a packaging area, and then we eliminate it. And so really just thinking about regular bowel movements are super important, so we can poo things out and then they've gone, and that's good riddance and wonderful. But if we're constipated, we're always working from a nutritional sense in trying to make our bowel work for us, so that obviously we can make sure that we're actually getting rid of things that have done the job and that we don't no longer want. And of course we also pee things out as well, which is super important while we keep hydrated, so that we can actually just keep that nice urinal flow, if you like, and that elimination going on as well. And so we've got rid of some hormones through the liver, which is wonderful. And now they're waiting to come out via our wee or our poo, so via the bladder or the bowel. But what happens, and why I'm just talking a little bit about the gut here, so don't worry about all the names on that, because we'll just keep it very simple, is that we've got to have a healthy gut and a healthy microbiome to be able to do that last part of elimination. And that's because when our hormones have been sorted in that part of the factory, and then they're going to get packed up into a package in the second part of the factory. If we have not got the right gut bacteria, and maybe sort of we've got a little bit more, let's just keep it simply saying good and bad, but there's no really good and bad, we just need them in balance. But just say we've kind of tipped over a little bit towards, we've got a few more bad floating around and not as many good, then we can actually, they can produce, if you like, little things that can start to cut those packages up. And so that means the estrogen would go back into the body again, the liver's going to have to process it again. So we've started to cut up those packages. So rather than taking the package out via our wee or our poo, actually what's happened now is we have cut the package up, and so that estrogen would go back into the body again, might exert some effects, and has got to come by the liver. So we're giving the liver double the workload to do, and obviously we don't really want it going back around the body again too much. So that's just really the connection for you. Why you might hear even in some groups that you might be on, or some talks you've attended, where we talk about the importance of gut health and liver health, because we always think, how is that connected to hormones? So it's really the clearance of the hormones, which is super important for us in keeping a healthy balance for us. And just up on the top left there, we've just literally got a picture of the ovaries, which are our primary producer of estrogen. I talked about the adrenal glands that would start to produce more base hormones for us to make estrogen for us as the ovaries start to shrink and atrophy, and then our adipose tissue, ultimately our fat cells as well. So really thinking about our body as a whole. And so what foods then would help nourish us, ladies, and what would help with the gut and what would help with the liver? Because if we always work with those, we're going to really help our hormonal system. So really thinking about things like oily fish. Oily fish, I'm sure you all know, contain essential fatty acids, the omega-3s and the omega-6s, but much more omega-3 and much more available omega-3 that we can use straight away. And so things like mackerel, sardines, tuna steak, and I know there's a lot of worry about tuna in terms of mercury load, but certainly a good wild-caught tuna steak every now and again. When we're thinking about wild salmon, very healthy fish to get in there as well, will provide us with a lot of omega-3. Omega-3s are very anti-inflammatory, and so that can support with our joints, it can support with our skin, our brain in terms of cognition as well. Vitamin D is also contained in your fish, and if you eat the skins, good for you because that's got the collagen in as well. So if you take a marine collagen supplement, say for instance, then that is usually from the fish skins, the fish scales. So it's actually sourced from that. So if you like the skin on, then that's wonderful. I was talking to a fellow nutritionist the other day, and she said that to get her daughter to eat the collagen, she actually takes the skin off the fish because she wants to eat it on the actual fish itself, and she actually chops it up and fries it and then puts it on as almost like a sprinkle. So there's many different ways we can get creative to make sure we're getting that collagen back in. But of course, if you're veggie, really you can get your essential fatty acids from some of your key plant foods. It just takes a little bit more to be able to break those down to the usable omega-3s, which sometimes the body can find quite a challenge, particularly if we're under a little bit of stress as well. If you are veggie, really look at kind of trying to get some seaweed in. So if you like all your sushis, you're going to be fine because obviously then you've got your fish and you've got your seaweed because that provides iodine. Iodine is important for our thyroid health, and so thyroid can sometimes be a little bit under strain with ladies as we start to put a bit more pressure on what we'd call the endocrine system, which is the hormonal system. But the thyroid here works really close with the adrenals that I've just talked about. So hopefully you can make a connection. If the adrenals are working a bit harder, sometimes that can put pressure on the thyroid, which is why ladies can suffer sometimes with the thyroid around this type of age. Really looking at walnuts, nice fatty nut there as well. And thinking about flax, I'm sure you've already heard about flax seeds or linseed, it's sometimes called. There's lots of powders now you can just add into your porridge if you're having that, or your breakfast. You can also steep the actual seeds as a tea, which is lovely, and then just drink that throughout the day, and it's very healthy for you. Lots of proteins help us obviously keep that muscle function strong, and some of my most favourite ones there in terms of clean nutrients, clean proteins that would help us keep that frame strong and obviously give us some nutrients in terms of iron, B vitamins, etc. If you are a vegan or vegetarian, tempeh does provide as well a whole protein, and tempeh is basically fermented soy. I like tempeh because if it's fermented, it's also as well supporting our gut, and so there's lots of tempeh out there now, and I always buy organic where I can because then you are definitely eliminating any pesticides, chemicals and all this type of thing. Veggies, you'll often hear a lot talking about broccoli and cruciferous veg, and that's because it's got in it some really special compounds in like your broccoli and your kale and your sprouts, which actually support getting rid of that estrogen from the body, really supporting the liver. So that's why it's super important to really think about that cruciferous vegetables as well. Garlic and onions also very supportive of the liver as well. Spinach, leafy greens, very good for overall health. Loads of B vitamins in there as well to help keep things moving through. And so really, if I was going to kind of just bring this down to a plate of food, if you was going to have a lovely, let's say, turkey stir fry with lots of cruciferous vegetables all chopped and stirred up in there with some lovely crushed garlic, some onions, throw them in, and then get your spinach thrown in as well on the side. That would be a beautiful, really healthy meal for you. Squeeze over some lemon or lime, because the lemon or lime have got special compounds in which also help liver health, but because they taste a bit bitter as well, bitters also support, if you like, our bile production, which feeds into the liver. And so that can really help us break down foods, particularly if we're suffering bloating and things like this. So many reasons why I would want to put those in. Bone broth, collagen and hyaluronic acid really help and support those joints and that tissue. Eggs, one of my absolute key go-tos almost every single day, because it's got all the nutrients needed for life. If we just put it really simply, if it can grow something inside of it, it's super healthy. But again, I would always go back to the organic free range, because if they're not organic and free range, then there's a chance, a high possibility that the hormones have been pumped into that chicken, which are going to come into its egg. Same with meat. So you've always got to be careful on the meat that you choose. If it's organic grass-fed beef, and I appreciate it's not cheap, because that's why, I might just have it like, once every couple of weeks or once a week, whatever it might be. But you know that it's clean per se, and it's very healthy source. Whereas when we get into all the processed meats, that's where we're going to get an extra external hormonal load that we won't want in the body. Fermented foods, super healthy for the gut. You can get like miso. I don't know if anybody's a fan of miso. Get a little jar, and you can just put a spoonful of that into hot water and have it like a little drink, which is super handy, especially if you're rushing. There's things like your kimchi and your sauerkraut, which is basically fermented vegetables. And if you like those, just popping that onto your meal as well will give you all of those pre and probiotics to really support the gut health, and then that will help the estrogen clearance as well as your overall health. Some key nutrients there, I've already mentioned vitamin D. I know we're in a challenge here in the Northern Hemisphere and certainly in England, but any chance you can get out in the sun, I always take my opportunity. Now, of course, I know that some people might bear easier than others, but certainly I would always try and get 20 minutes at least without any sun cream on to really give that sunlight the best chance of producing vitamin D in my body, because the best is the sun onto skin, and that's the easiest way of getting that in. But clearly, obviously, it's always about being safe, and you know your own tolerance limit depending on your skin type as well. But this time of year it can be a challenge, so I do believe, and I do take myself supplementation because it's needed across many areas. We know about immunity, it's needed for brain health, but also to help balance our hormonal system as well. A couple of sources there in terms of food: fish, eggs, mushrooms as well. But again, mushrooms can be variable because it depends how they've been grown as well. Some key vitamins there: B6, crucial for hormonal support and health. Vitamin A for mucous membranes. So one of the things that I said earlier, I touched on, mucous membranes can really start to dry up a little bit with this low progesterone. That then would translate to anywhere we've got mucus in our body, which is actually all over it. So we've got loads of mucus in our guts, which we need, and that keeps our gut healthy. That starts to dry up. We can also then start to get IBS type symptoms. We know that we've got mucus in our lungs, we've got mucus in our nose, and the idea of this mucus here is to trap things as well, because we know when we've got cold, we end up producing more mucus because we're trapping more pathogens, and we need to expel those. But also thinking on a more intimate level of mucus in terms of keeping our vaginal tract really nice and healthy, keeping pathogens out that we don't want in, but also keeping our vaginal microbiome that's in there fed and nourished. So super important. And as that can start to dry out, that's when some ladies might find sex a little bit more painful, but they also as well might find more UTIs, because as that starts to thin, we can become more susceptible to UTIs as well. So ladies do sometimes see a rise in that, and things like cystitis. Thinking about vitamin C, super important for energy and antioxidants as well. And K2 always works with vitamin D to help put the calcium in the right place into our bones and out of our arteries, which obviously we think about heart health when they start to calcify. Arteries should always be lovely and, if you like, not obviously movable to a degree, but they should be able to move in and out quite easy. When they calcify, that's when we get that hardening, that stiffness of arteries, which we definitely don't want. Some key minerals there in terms of magnesium, very calming in magnesium. We need a lot of magnesium, particularly now we're not getting so much in our foods because the soil's just so depleted in minerals and not what it used to be in terms of quality. Selenium supports thyroid, zinc supports all of our skin, hair, nails, mental wellness as well, and immune system. Chromium supports our blood sugar control and cravings as well. So I always think of chromium if I'm suffering myself from cravings, and that's just a visual there of some of the foods you can actually obtain these specific nutrients from. But it's not just what we put in and think about putting in, it's what we're taking out. And it's not to suck the life out of any of us or the fun out of any of us, because if we enjoy a croissant and a coffee every now and again, it's not going to do us any harm. But if we're having that every single day, it is going to throw our blood sugar out of balance. If, like we're living on pastries and pies and things and cookies, all these things are quite obvious, but things maybe not so obvious when we're doing things ourselves with flour. Maybe we've got table salt, so I'd be swapping that out for a much healthier salt, and maybe we can talk about that. And things that contain sugar that we might not think about, that are quite hidden actually, and what do we look for on a packet in terms of sugar. Whenever we're buying packet food, they can be hidden in the over 60 different names for sugar, so we just need to have a bit more of a beacon when we're actually shopping in supermarkets as well. Thinking about they might come from condiments. We often don't think about condiments. Things like pop, fizzy pop, Coca-Colas. We know crisps, again, not great and not healthy for us in obviously excess. And then of course alcohol. So I drink alcohol, I drink wine and beer, but again I would always be a bit conscious of A, how much I'm drinking, B, how much water I'm drinking alongside that, but also C, what else am I kind of having with that? Because if I'm going to have a glass of wine and then I'm going to have a croissant and then I might open a packet of crisps, that's really going to send me completely out of balance. My body's going to struggle to bring all of that in, because at the end of the day, obviously the body needs to process everything that we put in. So it's really just thinking about, what do I really enjoy? What can I ditch quite easily? And if I want to keep something in, what else can I get rid of? Or it might be that actually, do I need to look at my cosmetics? Because, my cosmetics, actually now I'm looking at the labels, they're full of all of these toxins. So we can just start to clean up little parts of our life to support us in terms of that toxic load, because anything we can do takes pressure off the liver. And if the liver's working really, really well, then that's going to be able to get rid of hormones and everything else, toxins, really, really easily. Thinking about, obviously, as our joints might start to ache and things like that, of course, we've got a very active group here. I don't need to tell you what to do, but we might need to pop onto these every now and again, just to kind of take the pressure off the joints. I think people sometimes that have run all their life can start to feel like the knees are starting to grind together a little bit now. Or maybe they're not getting far into the run before they're starting to get those joint aches. So sometimes we may need to switch. We may need to switch over to more like calisthenics type things as well to support the other sports that we're actually doing and focus on that core support. And so I always like to bring this to the table in terms of what are my health foundations that I think are really important for all of us. And not just ladies here, but all of us, is ultimately the base of that ladder. I think that we've really got to look at what we're putting into the body and how hydrated we are, because water is ultimately the thing that's going to be able to make us go to the loo as well, get rid of the toxins, because everything needs to move through blood and water and fluidity in our body. And if we don't have that fluidity, we're really going to start to get a bit more clogged up. It's a bit like, running on that smooth path to actually running through a swamp, if that makes sense. So things start to slope in the body. Sleep I've talked about, and sleep is absolutely crucial for us in terms of a sleep routine and the quality and quantity. And I appreciate as a lady going through that transition, it's not always as easy, but just to help us prioritise that. If we are suffering from night sweats, what can we do with the bedroom? What can we do with the sleep routine? Do we need to be on social media in bed, or do we just leave that downstairs now to actually just get that book out and stop the blue light? So what can we do in terms of cleaning things up almost? Low stress, easy said than done, because we're all dealing with various stresses in life, financial, it could be marital, it could be work stress. Something's going on in the family, illness, all of these types of things, but really thinking about how much stress we've got in our lives and maybe what stress we could actually just, start to cap off a little bit if possible. Exercise instructor, don't need to tell you guys about this because you're all super fit. How we think about things, I think, has a massive impact on us. And again, not so easy if we're suffering from anxiety or a low mood and things like this. But the more positive our outlook and the more differently that we look at things, I do believe that then that has an effect on our full body health and how our genes are expressed as well. And of course, I think at the top of the ladder there, so this would be almost the icing on the cake for me, is supplements. So if we do need that extra little bit of support as we're moving through this phase, or we're exercising a lot, what can we do just to help us either sleep a little bit better or manage some of our signs a little bit better and just support the body while it goes through this transitional phase here. And so really, this is all Gen M's stats again, just at the beginning, and that women really told us about what they wanted. They was finding it difficult to find, when they went into shops, products that would be able to support them naturally, either on the run or alongside HRT. They wanted menopause-specific label products to be able to easily identify on shelf when we're going to a store, and we can obviously just see hundreds of products, which one's suitable for me, and how can we make their menopause better. And if you see that on the bottom left, that's a real shame, because we've got less than 15% of ladies feel entirely in control of their feelings and how they're moving through that menopausal transition as well. And so we've really got to listen to what our ladies are saying. And so we did listen, and we started to work with the Gen M organisation, which is the Ladies Empowerment, going through this menopausal transition. If anybody's London based, you might have seen they did a takeover of Leicester Square, and they did like a huge menopause. It was almost like short videos of women empowerment, and they also took over one of the train stations. I don't think it was King's Cross. I can't remember if it was Euston, a weenie, you might remember which one it was, but they did this huge takeover because they really want to bring menopause and talking about it and empower women to the forefront of health. And so I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. I'd like to speak about this in a minute because I think we've got a few ladies on here that perhaps trialed some of our products, and it'd be really interesting to hear your experiences. But so I'm not going to talk about this for long. I just wanted to say that because of all of these recognised signs and symptoms that ladies might move through, is we really wanted to bring together something comprehensive that would support ladies from all angles. How do we deal with all of these things that might encompass us? And so really we've kind of brought, if you like, a super multivitamin along. I'll just pop back onto that one, along with an omega, to obviously support the brain health and cognitive function and vision in terms of mucous membranes, all of these things, along with botanical capsules, which help support the, if you like, the heat that we suffer from. And that obviously can help with sleeping a little better and all these type of things. And so I'm taking this myself, and it just gives me everything I need. And also what's in there, and what I feel is important, is the iodine as well, in the right amount for that thyroid health, because if we're supporting the thyroid, that if that's steady, that can help a lot of things as well. And so for me personally, I find this a great product, but I'm really keen to hear about the ladies and what you think. And so that's a lovely one, and it's also got digestive enzymes in there, so if you're suffering bloating, it's wonderful for helping digest your food. And we've also got their specific bacteria that's been studied for women, and it's been studied for women's vaginal biome to really support, if you like, in terms of keeping that really nice and healthy. And so when we think about UTIs and perhaps cystitis and things like that, the little botanicals is quite nice if you are just suffering really from kind of more like sweats and temperature control, and you think that your estrogen's kind of dropping, because we've got in there the soy isoflavone, so that can really support there as well. The sage is the one that really helps with temperature control. So if you like cooking and you love using your herbs, then please start using sage in your cooking, and I would encourage you to start using all herbs in there, but sage in particular is well studied and researched for helping temperature control. In there, ashwagandha, I'm sure you've heard loads about ashwagandha. It seems to be a buzz over the last couple of years. Ashwagandha is wonderful at helping to support mood, anxiety, and just really a feeling of wellness, and it also helps support the immune system as well. So lots of studies behind ashwagandha. So if you're feeling that you're not quite in the throes of things but you just want a gentle support, then that is a wonderful product there as well. It's also got some of your key B vitamins in there for you. So we ran, if you like, a little trial with some of our BOF meno panel here, which is wonderful. So I'm not going to read it out slide point for point because everybody can read, but we were super proud to be able to do this with 34 of you, which was great. And so you actually use this for 3 months on Menoactive or Meno Botanicals, and you started surveys at the beginning, at the end of month 2 and at the end of month 3. So we had the pre, how did you feel midway, and how did you feel at the end of that as well, so that we could really capture all of the information. And so, as I said, the starting out survey, this was on ladies between 41 and 71, and 5 had self-diagnosed themselves going into perimenopause. 2 actually thought they was in the menopause, and 1 post-menopause. So this was really kind of how they was feeling. But everyone really was generally fit and healthy, and only 1 of that group was actually taking HRT. So again, quite interesting really. And all but 1 were already taking general supplements, and the most common there you can see is omega-3s, multivitamins, and glucosamine. And so all, I think, ladies really already quite clued up there as well. And then they really wanted to take part there to help reduce the symptoms, to be able to try and get the body back into balance. And they was curious about the effectiveness of the products. So we actually asked them to see how they felt about these recognised 48 symptoms. And so there's actually 48 symptoms of menopause that ladies have identified, and we've talked about a lot of them here today, which is sweats, we've also talked about anxiety, we've talked about low mood, and we've talked about many different things there as well. And how often did they suffer them? Sorry, just excuse 1 second. Guys, can you just be, I'm still on the line, thank you. And so how often they actually suffered those symptoms. So was it all of the time? Was it often, just sometimes, or rarely? And so again, we had kind of that marker of how often these symptoms was actually popping up there as well. And so, as you can see, those were the symptoms that was the most common for ladies, and the bloating, the weight gain, lack of confidence, and this short-term memory issues as well. You can see there again, and I think more so for our panel here in terms of joint pain and muscle and how that might exacerbate. Dry eyes, I mentioned in terms of vitamin A and omegas, which is not often, sometimes it's related to going through this transitional phase here. And then, so what was the results then after 6 to 8 weeks of taking Revive Active? What was our ladies saying? So some of the all-time symptoms that had remained, the weight gain was still the main issue for our ladies as well. But a lot of the ladies, as you can see, they got rid of a lot of the symptoms that was bugging them before all of the time. And after about 10 to 12 weeks, all but one reported all-time symptoms reduced, and plus 3 of the panel reported all of their often symptoms had also reduced. So again, suffering those symptoms and signs less often, which is great. And at the end of the trial, by an out of 10 score of how menopause would impact you, average scores had improved by 2.5 points. And so really this ties in here, thinking about when we went right back to the beginning, that it was such a small percentage of ladies that had actually only spoken to the doctor about menopause. So I think it was 21%, and we had 25% here of the ladies that actually wanted to go and speak to the doctor about menopause at the beginning. And how many people had started talking to their children about menopause? Not many. And how many had obviously been spoken to? So again, it's almost, I think being spoken about a little bit more than it used to now, and in the household as well. And so we've got that, again, that kind of family impact and that awareness as well. And sport and active life, huge contributing factor on how they were with the symptoms. And I think that is because sometimes it's all marketed as doom and gloom going into perimenopause and menopause, because we can suffer, some ladies, some of these symptoms or a lot of these symptoms, but actually being fit and well going into it actually will deliver you a much better experience as well. And I think we all know that exercise as well is great for the body, but also great for the mind. And so this is just what a few of the ladies said here, which is wonderful. So improvement in brain fog, improvement in lack of night sweats, and somebody just feeling a bit more me, which I think is lovely. And I think, again, somebody here with hair loss has said it's pretty much stopped. I think that's so important for us ladies as well, because that also goes into confidence, does it, and how we present ourselves, how we feel as well. And so I've just put there for us, I know that some of our ladies here are also aware of some of the other things we're doing, because we did a joint webinar before, as you know, and so we talked about that and Amiga, and so some of the different pairings you can do depending on what you feel is most needed for yourself. And so with that said, that is it from me. So I hope you found it useful and enjoyed it. And I'd love to hand back to Jo if we've got some questions that have maybe come in. Or if there's any ladies that have been part of our panel, please share your experience.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nicola. Informative as always, and good job keeping the rabble out from outside as well at the end there. I know. It sounds like a busload of people just came to the house.
Subfloor, isn't it?
I know.
If, as Nicola said, if anybody does have any questions, then please feel free to pop them in the chat or use the raise hand function. Both of those are appropriate, and if I think the Q&A is still having a bit of difficulty, so those are your two options for this evening. Give it a quick minute, or am I going to pick on Kay, who's got a camera on? And
that's great. That'd be great. And I've got some questions that have come in on here as well, which I'll just try and get up shortly.
Excellent. If you want to go for those first, then you're all welcome to.
But it's just reloading up because it's on my other PC here, Joe. So we'll go back to Kay first. Kay, did you actually take part then in our trial? And if so, I'd love to hear your experience.
Yeah, so I was part of the trial. I was one of the 8 members that did the trial alongside Heidi, that was leading it from Revive. So yeah, I mean, as I've fed back to Nicola and Heidi personally, as well as on the surveys and everything, I definitely found that my kind of joint issues and knee pain and everything really did improve, kind of as soon as kind of I started taking, I was on the capsules, and since kind of the studies come to an end, I can feel it kind of coming back and starting to niggle again. So for me, it wasn't wasn't even anything in my mind until my physio suggested that it might be the start of kind of perimenopausal symptoms. It never even kind of crossed my mind. The past 12 months, I've had an injury that just won't go away with my knee and has made me kind of been able to run probably at 75%, and working with one of the most kind of like well-known fell and trail running physios that there is, and well-respected physios, was getting me so far. And then she just, we put our minds together and kind of tried to see where the cycle of my kind of injuries were coming from, because it seemed to be in a bit of a cyclical kind of rota, that I was kind of like doing well and then kind of suffering again. And she suggested that, she's treated a couple of other GB mountain runners that had gone through similar kind of injuries to me, such as hamstring injuries and knee tendon injuries and everything, and that it could be that, and suggested that I sent off for an estrogen test to check the levels myself and everything, and it came back low, and this was kind of like coincided with with the start of the survey as well. So for me, it was a real eye opener in terms of, instead of just trying to treat an injury, it was adapting my training to kind of certain levels of the month instead of going flat out all the time, and and thinking about things in a different way. And since then, touch wood, I've been able to probably run properly and flat out since probably the end of October, which has been nice. So for me, it was a real kind of game changer in terms of being part of the study, and kind of the help that I had from my physio that kind of put me on. I wouldn't have had any clue if Denise wouldn't have said it could be this, still to this day.
Well, that's really encouraging, Kay. So thank you for sharing that, because again, I think some of the things do catch us left field, don't they? And we don't quite expect it to have that type of impact. But that's a really encouraging story. And obviously, again, yeah, you've had that kind of multiple help, haven't you? And you've done it from multiple angles, like with the physio and everything. But that's really, really encouraging. I think it's encouraging for other ladies as well that might be obviously, trying to, move through the same that you're moving through, but still keep that level of performance as well. I think you're on mute, Joe.
Yep. Caught myself as soon as I said it. Thank you very much for that, Gaynor. That was excellent. I can't see any questions in the chat thus far, Nicola. Have your second set loaded?
Yeah, I think one came in. I just saw, I think Awena put one in, didn't she? I've already seen Awena come in there. I don't think it's working. I'm just gonna come up here, because I think we had one about joints. I don't know if I've really answered it when I'd said it was about joints and how would perhaps the menopause affect joint health. And I hope that I've answered that in terms of the collagen and the bone loss as well, that we would obviously see that big dip there. So I'm hoping that that's probably answered that. And I think what we can do about that, again, hopefully that helps with saying about the fish and the fish skins, the bone broth. So that will certainly help keep the joints as well just that little bit stronger. I know you guys all know about protein, so important, but really thinking about the essential fatty acids as well, because I think that's what keeps us fluid as well. And essential fatty acids, so anti-inflammatory. And I just think when we're looking at joint health and you're pounding your joints all the time, we know that they're kind of under that wear and tear. So I think that's super important as well. And we might have ladies on here that I think when we're pushing our bodies, sometimes the thyroid, and I know I've talked about thyroid a couple of times, can give us a little bit of a wobble, but that can manifest in what we might feel in some of these perimenopausal, menopausal symptoms. But it's just so that it's all connected. And I think that's where, if you're doing it by food, seaweed can be super supportive. If you don't like seaweed and you're taking a multivitamin or like taking the Menoactive, that is just sort of like that nice gentle support as well to keep that steady for sure. Awena, would you like to come off mic? Did you have some other questions? Sorry, because they're not shown in the chat.
Perfect. So there were a few questions that came through, and some of them were just in regards to dietary changes that can enhance effectiveness of the supplements during menopause, was one of them that came through.
Yeah, and so I'm hoping that I've probably maybe answered that one a little bit, in just to say that I think it's always we're thinking about what can we put in, but it's what we take out as well. It's a bit like, isn't it? It's a bit like balancing a seesaw. And you guys on here are super healthy, and you're just feeling your bodies to, obviously, to do your best at the supports. So this is probably a very conscious, I would say, health conscious group, and you're very conscious about what you're feeding your body. But I think it's just, we've got to enjoy life, but it's just, again, about, for me, probably a big thing is about reading food labels, because if we've all got busy lives and fast lives, it can be, and I've been through these phases, particularly with travelling a lot as well with work, is sometimes you've just got to get whatever you think is best available. But sometimes when you turn it around and you actually look at all the stuff that's in it, that can be a bit worrying. So I would just say, if you are in that situation, and you're having to use those foods a lot, is just be conscious of starting to read labels a little bit better, looking out for how many E numbers are in there. Anything ending in O's, O-S-E, sugar containing, but not necessarily just that, but syrup, date syrup. So everybody's using a lot of sugars lately. How many sugars could you even just spot by looking at that? Rapeseed oil is one of those where I just really don't like that it's in soups now. So if you're getting a fresh soup out the fridge, there's in so many soups. If you're on plant milks, they'll often fill it up with rapeseed oil. So just be really conscious of that. And the reason I say that is because rapeseed oil is a very industrial processed oil, but it's also very high in omega-6. And so omega-6 is an essential fat, but rapeseed isn't in foods like that. It's not a healthy source. So, and you're always looking at the balance between omega-6 and omega-3. Too much omega-6 in our diet, which tends to be in all the processed and packaged foods, and things like fish and chips and all that type of cheap oils that people would fry in. Just always be careful about the balance of that. That's why the fatty fish is really good to get it in, and thinking about your omega-3s. Because that's what we all lack. We're not having enough fish, or we're not cooking enough fish, or some of us might not even eat fish. So the question for me then is, where would we be getting the essential fats from? So I think there's just a couple of little things that you can look at in detail. So hopefully that helps, Awena, just to delve into a bit of detail instead of being a bit general.
That's perfect, thank you. And then I think you've kind of answered everything else. We talked about collagen in reference to beauty complex and joint complex in menopause, and I think you've kind of covered all of the other questions that have come through.
Wonderful, thanks, Awena. Thank you for sharing them.
That was really informative. Kate. Thank you, Nick.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah. But if any ladies, I know some ladies don't like speaking up, and it's quite understandable. But if you have, like Joe said, got any questions that I can support you with after this, I know that Joe will email them through to me, and I'll always answer the best that I can.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm more than happy to put through any of those requests on the feedback form as well. There'll be an opportunity to do so. So it doesn't have to be said out here in the public forum. Yep. But in that case, if we have come to the end of the questions, then I'll look to wrap things up for the session. Huge thank you, Nicola. Fantastically informative as always. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and really enjoyed it. And a huge thank you to everybody who's attended this evening on a Friday night. It's very much appreciated. I know that we lost Lynn along the way, who said she was watching from just outside of Alicante. So
wonderful.
She ran out of the signal, and then so she'll be catching up on the video.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry about the noise as well. So sorry if anybody can be edited out. It would be good. Sorry. It's a Friday night, and it's just, daughter's just come back.
I will look to get the video out on Monday, and it'll be edited as well and uploaded to the YouTube channel. So that will be all sorted. And as a little bit of promotion, the next and final session will be on Monday, and that will be the impact of come and try it events on your local community, including good practice, hosted by our very own partnerships manager, Kay Hawke. She's everywhere at the moment. So you'll be receiving the sign-up link for that on Monday, but you can find that on the British Orienteering website as well, under the webinars section or the development conferences section too. A huge thank you to everybody again for attending, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Lovely to spend some time with you all. Bye-bye.